Hello class. This week we are going to talk about one of our shared foundations, the Inquire Foundation from the AASL National School Library Standards. One of the big pieces in our teaching and learning class is thinking about how do we get those students to become inquirers, thinking critically, identifying problems, developing strategies for that problem solving, and no matter what grade you are working with, kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade, before our students leave, we need them to be college and career ready or ready to go into any scenario where they can navigate and decide, what is important and what they need to find answers for. And so there's lots of different strategies. So one of the things I'm going to share with you today is a presentation that Dr. McAllister Owens and I did a while back, but it has remained current. And while future ready school librarians always talk about the inquiry process, one of the best things you can do is find an information literacy skill process that you can take and tailor for yourself. And so this one is going to use the Big Six model, but there are tons of models out there, so don't think that this is the be-all end-all. This was just the one that made the most sense for us when we were still working in our school libraries to help break down the research process, not just for our students, but also for our teachers. And I know that these are old standards now, but when we were putting together this presentation, it was right at the beginning when Common Core state standards were just coming out, especially at the middle school, junior high, high school level. I know that they rolled out first in the elementary levels, but Tracy was at an elementary school, it was K-5. So she was thinking more about her 5th grade teachers. I was at a middle school at the same time, and it was getting ready to come out for the others. And with that introduction of standards, it was the belief that students would be using technology thoughtfully to enhance their reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language use, and they would tailor searches online to acquire useful information efficiently. They would integrate what they learned using technology and what they learned offline. Well, that's all well and good for the students to be able to do that, but the problem was the teachers were not prepared in many of the different subject areas, not just the language art areas, but they were going to have to be doing these big research projects. So if you look at the Arkansas Department of Education, any of the standards out there right now currently, you see over on the right side you can click, we've even got the K-8 computer science standards all the way down through the new, science standards. There's the phys ed and health. But one of the things that I don't know that everyone realizes is this disciplinary literacy tab. And years ago, the Arkansas Department of Ed decided that the disciplinary literacy standards, they pretty much came about from Common Core for 6th through 12th grade, is where students need to be able to have, the teachers need to have the knowledge and skills that students are going to need for reading and writing in their content areas. And to support that, the resources that the teachers are going to need are within these texts. And if you pull open any of them, now notice math is missing, and so is language arts, because, you think about it, the language arts classes are already doing literacy, I would hope, and mathematics is another tested area that's, super important. And even though people don't think that there's reading that goes on in literacy, think about any word problems, there actually is. But I think to keep the math departments happy, they didn't go ahead and roll these out. But if you pull open any of these, I just pulled open the social studies one, not to pick on anyone, but if you think about many secondary schools, the social studies or history teacher typically is going to be a coach. And if you think about it, their research skills or information literacy skills may not be exactly what they need to be. They've studied kinesiology and a lot of things, but they may not understand the research process themselves. And that could be with your science teachers, also your art teachers, fine arts, any of those. So if I use the Control F and just type in the word research, research comes up 27 times in the disciplinary literacy standards for the history and social studies. So very first one, students should begin to draw conclusions as to why and how evidence is contradictory. Students should interpret a text by identifying the type of document, structure, author, date written, document source, point of view, main idea, and impact that the document will have on the reader, which leads the students to ask questions and guide further research for a deeper understanding. So we're still trying to get those students beyond just finding information and taking it at face value. Instead, we want them really to start thinking about the information that they're taking in and deciphering what is relevant, what isn't, what's a bias, what are those different things. And that doesn't just have to be in the social studies class. So again, historians study the past, change over time, and concerned with continuous systematic narrative and research of previous events. So that's one of the standards, but if you keep going, you know, civics and government, they'll research political ideas. They're talking about historians, but when you really start to break down the standards, you will see that research is throughout these disciplinary literacy standards. And if you go down, any of these disciplinary literacy standards have the Arkansas Anchor Standards for writing. Doesn't matter if it's the social studies one, the science one, the fine arts one, but if you look at these main topics, research to build and present knowledge. They want all students in all classes to conduct short, as well as more sustained research projects focused on questions that demonstrate understanding of the subject under investigation. So the students are supposed to gather relevant information from multiple print and digital sources, assess the credibility and the accuracy of each source, integrate the information while avoiding plagiarism. Then they're supposed to draw evidence from that literary or informational text to support their synthesis and reflection of all of that information. That sounds like information literacy skills. So this is something that we can help as school librarians, not just show students how to do the process, but also educate our teachers, maybe if they did not have, or they don't feel comfortable enough to be able to teach the research process. Which brings me to the presentation that Dr. McAllister and I did for our faculty. So bottom line, is just to kind of define what the Big Six is, or whatever model it is you're going to use. So the Big Six, it was created by Mike Eisenberg and Bob Berkowitz. It's a thinking routine. It's information process skills, but it allows for collaboration opportunities between our teachers and the teacher librarian. Now, Big Six is more 4th grade through 12th grade, but there is a smaller process that we'll talk about in just a minute. So the six steps in the Big Six are, the first step is task definition, and we'll break this down in just a few minutes. The second step is the information seeking strategies. The third one is location and access. The fourth is the use of information. Fifth is that synthesis, and sixth, there does need to be an evaluation of the process and in the product that ends up happening at the end of these questions. And it doesn't have to be a big product that you've created, but evaluating and reflecting on the processes are key in most of our learning. So for our younger students, this would be our kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, maybe even up through 3rd grade. There's just the Super 3, and it's plan, do, review. They plan whatever topic or question they want to answer, and they do the little research, and then they kind of review and decide whether or not they've answered their question and done what they needed to. So you can break it down even further. And there's a great website I'll share in just a few minutes that has all kinds of resources, lesson ideas, whether it's for the Big Six model or for the Super 3, depending on what grade level you are involved. So we're going to break down our 6 main steps. So we'll start with task definition. If you think about it, many times classes come to the library for research. They have a research packet, but the students really don't know what they're trying to do. What is the end product that their teacher is going to look for? When we take the time to collaborate with the teachers before they come to the library or before they start a research project, I realize now with most one-to-one classrooms that they don't necessarily have to come down and use the technology or even the print sources within the school library. You can also, locate the print resources, send them down there. And we will talk about print here in just a minute. But, I realized that this was taken at a time when the library might have been one of the few places, or an open computer lab might have been a place where, all of the students could research at one time. But if we can take that time to help make a plan or strategy of things that they can do in the classroom before they, come on down to the library before they start their research project, when we make that, we're not only making ourselves indispensable to the teachers, but also to the content. And then by that way, planning ahead, we can help those teachers problem solve and troubleshoot those areas that may arise before they get to the library or the research experience is a disaster. I don't know how many times I've had teachers come up with an entire plan and decide they want to do something, but they find out partway through that it's just too hard. Or do they think it's too hard because the kids are not successful the very first day in finding all of their information, which to me, that's not even realistic. But sometimes a teacher wants to take the path of least resistance and let a student change a topic, even though they just haven't dug deep enough. So when we start thinking about task definition, the teacher, before anything ever gets started, they need to define the task. What is the destination? What are the students going to have to do? What's the final product? So they're going to want to brainstorm questions, maybe even do, a KW chart. What do the students already know? What do they want to know? Just to kind of help those students break down, whatever their questions are, so they kind of have some ideas of maybe some search strategies and some ideas for topics that they can look up, or keywords that they can kind of expand from. Science teachers, for me, they have done one of the best jobs with this when they would do kind of a brainstorming, like a graphic organizer, where they would start with a topic and then they would have the students kind of broaden those topics and think about other things they could look for before they ever got into the library. So what could the teacher do? Or the teacher librarian? Well, we can pre-plan. We can make sure to get the library set up. If that's where they're coming, we can collaborate with that teacher, kind of walk through what those tasks are going to be and what the final product will be. We can help kind of problem solve and troubleshoot maybe some of those technology issues, maybe, either having enough devices, getting the students logged into the devices, finding other information resources, and we'll talk about those in just a minute, rather than just thinking about the computer being the be-all, end-all. And we can help make it an enjoyable experience so the teacher is not nearly as stressed. So step 2 is information seeking strategies. We need to get the students to think about all possible sources, not just those computer-based applications. So with any pre-planning and collaboration, you can help the teacher determine which are the best information sources for them to use with their students. Many times, they just don't know what's out there and available. Google isn't always the best source. If it's left up to the teacher, they may take the least line of resistance and let the students just show up and start searching. But you can take into account not only what they're trying to research, but their learning styles and the needs of the students. If you know that you've got some lower level students along with some upper level in the same class, you might be able to guide them towards some of those databases that have different reading levels. So if Johnny is sitting next to Susie, Johnny needs something, above and beyond a 6th grade level, and Susie needs something maybe more a 3rd or a 4th grade. This Encyclopedia Britannica or, World Book Online, a lot of times they'll have 3 different levels, and kids can be sitting side by side in the same database and not realize somebody else has maybe an easier version. Or maybe you've got some students that are going to need an audio version that's going to read the text to the students. So you can always provide those technology resources when you're pre-planning at the very beginning. Maybe you're just going to make sure every computer or Chromebook or whatever it is you're using has a set of headphones in case a student wants to listen to the text being read. So it's important for you to know which students are in the class, maybe who have those reading difficulties. Maybe they're ELL or they have some other special learning needs. So that's going to help you troubleshoot those problems before they arise. So think about books. Do you have print encyclopedias still? Do you have current almanacs, atlases? Do you have magazine articles or other periodicals or even brochures? Using those print resources are going to give students more than just the opportunity to use their online or technology search strategies. Digital materials, maybe you've got access to a video database, watchknowlearn.org, or some of the other resources where some of your students that are visual learners, they can get information out of there to help them research and solve their problems. I'm going to use specific websites or the Google Advanced Search strategy. Maybe you've taught Boolean logic, or maybe you have even curated some websites that are sufficient and appropriate for the research that you guys are getting ready to do, and you put them either into some type of curation tool like Symbaloo or even a portal, so everything is together for the students, or even a HyperDoc, a Google Doc that you share that has the links embedded. When you're working with 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, finding the correct website isn't always the easiest thing to do, just because the students sometimes miss a period or a colon or something else. Our databases. Encyclopedia Britannica is one that I highly recommend a district, if you've got some extra money to purchase. The years that Traveler does not offer Encyclopedia Britannica as a free resource, I think it's one of the best that we had at the middle school, junior high, and high school. Now for elementary, there might be some other databases that are more appropriate. But the Traveler project that's offered by the Arkansas State Library is huge. It's wonderful as long as our teachers know that it exists, and our students do as well. Encyclopedia of Arkansas is fantastic for your Arkansas history research and a lot of other things that are Arkansas related. So it's a great resource in case you didn't realize that it was available. So if you've not been introduced yet to the Arkansas State Library, the Traveler databases, you can look it up, but this year our student resources, K-8, Culturegrams is wonderful for our geography classes and anything culturally related. The early World of Learning, the World Book, that's going to be for your lower elementary. But down here you also have your World Book Discover, your World Book Student, depending on what level your students are. For your language art or your foreign language classes and even your ESL students, the Mango Languages took the place of a different resource we had last year. There are tons of ebooks that our students have access to, but you can also look at the junior high and the high school levels. ProQuest is one of the best resources that I've used even as a college student, and we can show our students how to use it so when they do get to their next academic level, they're ready and they don't have to maybe ask as many questions. So a final source that I think a lot of times we don't think about are interviews. And I always use the example of my oldest son. He was in a GT class and they had an extra project to do when he was in 3rd or 4th grade, maybe 5th. And he was all things dinosaurs. Every time he got to do some type of choice research project. His had something to do with some type of dinosaur. So he was researching a live pleurodon. I just remember that. I probably didn't pronounce it correctly until he corrected me, even at 8 or 9 years old. And he was doing some research. I had showed him. He had never heard of the Traveler Project or the databases. That was just something that his GT teacher didn't know about. She didn't think to ask the school librarian, who did know about it, because I knew the elementary level, and I knew that Miss Havens had been introducing the databases, but the third or fourth grade mind didn't take, that learning and think about this is what I need to use instead. They had been doing like scavenger hunts and some other things in the library, and that, I think, is part of the problem with not collaborating even at the elementary level, is knowing all of the different things that your librarian can do to help out those classroom teachers. So the GT teacher just said, pick a project, and she okayed it, and then just kind of turned the students loose. And Joseph was doing his research, and we were using the databases, and on one of the databases, it took us to an outside site, and on the site, there was a lot of information about a live pleurodon, but there was also a contact tab over on the left that showed the doctor, Dr. Adam Stewart Smith, who had put together the resources. He was working at Oxford University, and he was a paleontologist, but his contact information was there, and Joseph said, I wonder if I could ask this guy some questions. He said, it's got a contact here. I said, well, I don't think you can. He didn't have an email address at the time. I said, but I can. So we emailed. I had Joseph sit down. He told this paleontologist who he was, and he had a couple of questions that he just couldn't find the answer to. And so he sent this professor these questions, and the man answered within 24 hours and answered both questions for Joseph. And that was one of the neatest things that I saw as a parent, but also as a teacher, where this kid wanted to know, a little bit more. He wasn't finding the answers. He was only in 3rd or 4th grade. But he found that interview. So don't always, lock your students into using the same resources and websites every time. And I will say this right now, the print resources, I think they are key in our students knowing how to navigate all kinds of issues. And here is the other thing. We had to use print resources every once in a while with a middle school student who lost their internet access because they had done something to violate our acceptable use policy. So I'm a firm believer in teaching students how to use those print resources no matter what, showing them what an index is. Some students actually like the print encyclopedias better than they can find it online. A lot of times they want to print things so they can read it and highlight. So I think print encyclopedias, I don't think you should buy a new set every single year. But I do think that having a set is handy. It also teaches students, alphabetical skills and some of those other things. Because I found later, as I kept telling them, oh, think of it as a phone book, look up the last name, I realized kids don't use phone books anymore. So our third step is location and access. And this is something that I am a firm believer in round-robin research. Instead of having every student doing the exact same thing at the exact same time and everyone on a computer, I think it's a good idea to set up a couple of different stations. The teacher needs to make sure each day that they remind the students of whatever the essential questions are or whatever the task is at hand. Divide the students into 3 groups and have 15-minute rotations. The student or the teacher librarian can create those stations. One station can be just for print resources. So she can take the time and take the students over, in a smaller group, over to the library side or those print resources and kind of work a little more one-on-one. She might also set up, or he, one set of computers just for the databases and give the students, you've got 15 minutes for your topic for these databases. And then the other group of students on a different set of computers just using search engines. And this way, if you give those students that time frame, you've got 15 minutes to do this. I don't know how many times we would start a research project and students would get started working, and those squeaky wheels get the grease. So the kids that were asking questions and really needing some help, that's where the teacher and the librarian usually ended up focusing. And by the end of the period, you could ask the question, maybe an exit slip or something else. How are you doing at this point in time? And some kids would always say, I didn't find anything. I wasted an entire day. I don't know how they could waste an entire day, except I realized, even I do it myself, you kind of fall down a rabbit hole sometimes when you're on the computer and you get distracted by lots and lots of other things. If you have small goals that you've broken down and you have a finite amount of time, I really think the students are going to be less likely to waste an entire class period. Which brings us to our next big section, and this is step 4, the use of information. A great philosopher once said the number one mistake most students make when researching is they do not take the time to read. And that was actually Dr. McAllister who said that, but she is absolutely right. The kids think just because a search tab pulls something open, or even an encyclopedia article has the Civil War in it, they think that they found all of their information, but they don't want to actually take the time and read all the way through and determine what's relevant and what isn't. So one of the things that we broke this down into was using a strategy that literacy teachers have used probably for years, the WRAP strategy. So read a paragraph. You need to teach the kids and you need to teach the teachers to take everything just one bite at a time. Don't try to read the whole article or the whole page or the whole website at once. Start with just one paragraph at a time. While you're reading that one paragraph, ask yourself some questions. What's the most important detail from this paragraph? What is the one thing I would want someone to know what I just read? What made me say, wow, I didn't know that? And if they don't get anything out of that, well, they can just kind of go on to the next paragraph. And that way, as they start to document and either take notes, or if you're letting them copy and paste things into their sloppy copy and then they take it and synthesize it later, that's a whole different idea. But they don't have to, they're not cutting and pasting an entire article. P is put it in your own words. That's when you sum up what you learned from that paragraph. Write it down in your own words, say it out loud, and then write it down. It helps those strategies, those kids figure out what those main ideas are, and kind of when they hear it out loud, they can decide, oh, yeah, that does make sense, or no, that wasn't even interesting, or no, I don't think I even need that for my final project. So the use of information, you also might want to give the students a way to document what they found and where they found it. So back a long, long time ago in another galaxy, this is where students would use note cards. I actually think note cards, even though I used them 30, 40 years ago, I still think they are very, very, very relevant for our students, or just a graphic organizer, some place for students to be able to keep their information. And most of them now, they may start a Google Doc. And being a Google school, that was one of the things our students didn't lose their information as much. Before, when they had to use Word documents, they had to remember to save them into their drive, but with a Google Doc, it's in anybody's Google Drive, and it doesn't matter which computer you get the next day. But one of the best things to do is just kind of break it down, and this can go all the way up to senior high school, but have the student document what resource type they were using, have another column, what did they find from that resource, and then where did they find it? At least get down the title, the author, the place it was published, the web address, the copyright date. And those are things, if your students are merely putting in a web address, you as the school librarian need to go back and start to teach the students how to locate when it was published, or whatever the website was when it was last updated, who is responsible for it, because that's one of the things that students struggle with the most even when they get into college and even in grad school. And this is something when you have the different stations set up, once you've shown the students, if they're using a print resource, how to locate, the title page and things, that's something that every student should be able to do. You may have to go over and help a little bit. Most of the databases, they will have an automatic citation tool somewhere that will locate most of the information. This is where, if those students are on those search engines and they're locating resources on their own, you're going to probably need to spend the most help trying to help those students locate those key pieces of information that they're going to need if they decide to use the information that they found, and then they have to document where they found it. So one more thing before you go. If you're in a library and you've got enough room, you might try to provide a place for the students to keep their research for that week if they're set up to come, whether it's a folder per class period or a teacher tub, everything in its place and a place for everything, especially at the middle school level, even upper elementary, and even at the junior high level. Kids lose their stuff. We know that, and teachers do too. Wrap it up. Before the students leave the library each day, ask them. Do it as a quick exit ticket. This is where you could use those note cards. You probably have 50 million of them. But ask them to jot down, what did they find today? Where are you in the research? And what do you need to do tomorrow? Because, if they sleep between that day and the next day, and they had basketball practice, and they had homework, and I don't know, they played Fortnite, they're going to the next day come back in and have to revisit. Oh, this is what I did. This is what I found. Oh, this is where I need to start. Where if they've got this little note card as they walk out, you can hand them the note card the next morning or the next afternoon whenever they come back, and they can just kind of pick right back up where they left off. Which brings us to our fifth step, and that is the synthesis. Organizing the information from multiple sources. Students need to understand, and the teachers need to understand, that not all the information is worth keeping. They need to start looking at what information, what pieces go together. And this is where an outline or note cards really do come in handy. And that's why I like the note cards, because physically I could move different pieces around. Or if you even want to cut out different sentences from the same note card, and you might keep them on, all the yellow ones were from this resource and all the pink ones were from this resource. The thing is, that way the students can start to see, where did I get this information from? But they physically, kinesthetically, you're differentiating those kids that need to be able to move things around so they make sense. Some kids get it, and they can just cut and paste and copy and keep track of everything. But a lot of our kids, when they first start researching, that's really a hard thing for them to do. And when they're synthesizing, this is when they're preparing for, whatever presentation or whatever final product they're trying to put together. What information is going to make the cut? What are those key points? And we need to also be teaching those design tools of presentation, instead of taking a PowerPoint and putting every single word on the slide, figuring out, teaching them the rule of 6, no more than 6 words per bullet, no more than 6 bullets per slide. Or you can do the rule of 5 or whatever, you can decide what works for you, and make sure that you're consistent. And that way throughout the students' academic progress, they will start to do these things automatically. And so the evaluation, make sure that you allow the students a chance to self-evaluate. Let them judge the product. Was it effective in the process? Were they very efficient? Let the teacher and student need to conference together, and you need to have some type of rubric. And this might be something that the teacher does, if they've run out of time after they've done their research. If the librarian can get down there and help with the evaluation, one of the biggest things students say is, a lot of times, even if they're not doing a paper anymore, but they're doing a presentation, there's never time for them to present and show anyone. It's just the teacher whose eyes are on it. if you can allow some type, or the teacher can allow some type of peer conferencing to let others look at their stuff, they really are going to take more time when they know that someone else's eyes, besides just the teacher or even the school librarian, are going to be on it. So you might have them, before they turn in their stuff, do a 3 before me. Have 3 other people look at it, or rotate in groups of 4. Everyone pull open your project, and then you just kind of round robin. You set a timer for 2 minutes and let everyone look and give a little bit of feedback. One of the things about the 3 before me, I usually assign the students someone, like we may have the roster up posted on the library wall, and they have to find the 3 people under their name. Otherwise, it turns into a popularity contest, and that happened a lot at middle school, junior high. They don't know sometimes how to talk to each other. I think elementary seem to be a little more open. They're not worried about the boy-girl thing, maybe. I don't know. I've never taught elementary, but I know that at the 6th, 7th grade, they really start to get insecure. But if everyone is assigned 3 people, and it's a specific 3 people, and then whoever's last name, at the bottom, then you go up and find the top 3 names. I think it just makes it a little more fair. Or if you want to differentiate even a little bit more, maybe strategically pair people that will give good feedback even to your SPED students, but maybe not, just not in a nice way. But that's where, being the school librarian, it is a little bit harder. This is something you probably need to rely a little more on the teacher. If they are with that class day in and day out, they're going to know the personalities and the students quite a bit more. Don't forget to ask, though, the content teacher for an evaluation. Ask them to evaluate the product and the efficiency of the process, and then you also both need to self-reflect. Was I an effective teacher librarian? What was good about it? What was bad? Where can I improve? And make sure you document these notes and keep track. That way, the next year or the next semester, when a project comes up, you can go back and look and think, oh, okay, here's what went really well, and we're going to do this again. This didn't work so well, so here are ideas to improve. And that way, if you keep track of that, then you're a whole lot more likely to end up with relevant products. The Big 6 website is full of lesson ideas, resources, and we also, Dr. McAllister and I there were 2 Conway librarians, Crystal Ream and Sloan Powell, who started the whole presentation for us. So we wanted to make sure that we gave credit where it was due. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the website and just let you guys look around just for a minute. But hopefully this kind of helps you get an idea of how to break down the process of making research manageable for your adult learners, kind of showing those teachers, but then also how you can break it down for your own student. Okay, and there are all kinds of resources out there, and like I said, the Big 6 is not the only model that you can use. I just found it to be one of the most user-friendly, and I did a lot of research with it for my dissertation. And it is a .com, so you will notice that you do have your advertisements. You guys know you can always turn those off. But the good news is they are transitioning to the big6.org, so it will become a little more professional. You can see that on the news site, which is up and running already. They're just transitioning everything over there. There are instructional materials already here. So if you just want to go back and kind of revisit, there's handouts that are available for you to be able to use. There are different presentations. So maybe you are in a K-3 school and you want to do a real fast Super 3 dinosaur lesson. I know that Joseph would have been all over that. There were videos that have already been uploaded. There's planners and organizers, different types of checklists. Even if you decide that the Big 6 model isn't the one that you want to use, but you want to use some of the different checklists, they are all available on the big6.org site. So hopefully this will give you guys an idea of a way to incorporate instructional information into your teacher's hands on information literacy skills, which aren't library skills. Instead, they're problem solving, finding and locating pertinent information, and being able to take it and synthesize it, all of those things that we want our 21st century learners to be able to do.